just a few folks, and please be as brief as you can. I know you all waited as well. So
as everyone's coming in, I just dropped in the chat the link to our attendance form. Whether you are part of the Washington Township community or you're a guest, we would really love to have you fill out that form just so we can capture everyone that joined us tonight.
Okay, I am going to go ahead and get started this evening. Welcome, everyone. I see we have quite a few people on and some new folks, I think. My name is Shelley Clark. I am the president this year of the Washington Township Parent Council Network. I will share with you our meeting agenda this evening. I need to preface this whole thing by letting you know that I was just watching on my phone that our special guest, Joel Hand, just finished testifying downtown at the State House. And so he's going to try his best to jump on this call as soon as possible. Hopefully he'll be joining us soon, but we have a few things to go over before he would get here. So I just wanted to let you know that. I will start by going over just the basic introduction of what Parent Council Network is, what our mission is, and what our beliefs are. Then we will get an update from the administration from Dr. Sean Taylor. We'll also get an update from our school board liaison, Deirdre George Davis. And then after that, we hope to jump into the legislative update with our special guests from the Indiana Coalition for Public Education. We hope to have soon Joel Hand, who is the general counsel and lobbyist for ICPE. We also have the president of ICPE joining us, Kathy Fuentes-Rohr. So we will hear from them. And full disclosure, I serve as a parent volunteer board member on the Indiana Coalition for Public Education. So I know these people, and we've had them in the past, I think almost every year, not when I was on the board for ICPE, but even before then, we've always had them as our special guests to give us a legislative update and some legislative analysis. So we appreciate that. After our main topic, we'll hear from Crystal Pascal, who is chair for our Public Policy Committee. We'll get an update on our finances from our treasurer, Taryn Grieser. We'll give you a preview of what's to come next month, and we'll have Scott Russell tell us a little bit about that. And then we'll have any other announcements and some closing remarks, and then we'll be finished. So I'll just start by explaining what Parent Council Network is. Washington Township Parent Council Network is an independent, nonpartisan group of parent and caregiver advocates of Washington Township students who represent a diverse community in Indianapolis and believe that high quality and equitably funded public education under local democratic control is an investment in the future. And our mission is to represent and give district-wide voice to the educational interests of families and to strive to enhance the quality of public education in the township. We have 5 core beliefs. Our highest priorities are our children and their education. We value public education in our community public schools. Parents have the right to meaningful participation in the process of public education. Diverse parent leadership, talent, influence, and perspective are all vital to excellent education. And the community of Washington Township values and supports public schools and public education. We have 4 pillars that we focus on to support our mission. Number 1, we inform and empower parents by providing objective and pertinent information regarding our schools. I mean, information is really powerful, and we think parents need to be informed. We collaborate with parents and educators to maintain the quality and highlight the diversity of our schools. We influence the future of public education in our school district by involving our parents in public policy. That's kind of what we're trying to do tonight, inform and influence. And then advocate. We advocate for all Washington Township students by electing school board members that we as parents feel will move our district forward. This is what our structure looks like. We have elementary school representation, middle school representation, and high school representation. That is for voting members. That is for people who have pledged to attend more than five or more meetings a year. But we'd like you to know that if you are a parent in Washington Township or a caregiver, you are automatically an ad hoc member of this group. You don't have to pay any money. You don't have to do anything special. You're here, you're an ad hoc member. So if you would like to be a voting member, we do have a sign up for that. I'm not sure if we're still doing that, but we could put that in the chat possibly if someone has that available. But that is, so we have 130 possible voting members for this group. And voting just means that you get to participate in the school board candidate endorsement process, any parent council business that we vote on, any big things that we do that require a vote. We would consult with our voting members for those things. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter. We have a website, so you can find information there. Our Facebook is the most active, and so I would suggest if you're on Facebook to like and follow us. And just a few ground rules. Our meetings are usually recorded. Please mute yourself if you're speaking, unless you are speaking. And we know that it's really hard to do all of this and be a parent, so just be as present as you can. We know you're amongst friends and parents. We get it. And I just want to say that we're tackling issues, not people. So there's no, back and forth with people, and any specific concerns that you have regarding specific individuals. Those are HR issues, and we will direct you to administration for those. And we just have a culture of respecting each other's opinions and personal experiences here. So with that, I will let Dr. Taylor go ahead and start by giving us the administration update tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Shelley, and good evening, everyone. I hope everyone had a great winter break, and Happy New Year to you. I have a few announcements to make this evening. I first want to start with some acknowledgements and lift up some of our teammates in Washington Township to you. First, want to start off with our building principals. I had the privilege, our teaching and learning team had the privilege of spending the majority of the day today in meetings with principals via Zoom, and just continue to be grateful for all that our school principals are doing for our students and staff and our community at large. And so if you wouldn't mind, if you get an opportunity or you get a chance in the days ahead and you remember, if you could send them a little note of gratitude, I know that would go a long way, because they are working to overcome some big obstacles in their buildings, and they're doing that with just kind of we'll get it done mentality. And I'm super honored and privileged to work with an outstanding group of principals in our district, and grateful for the chance to support them. So I appreciate you doing that. The second acknowledgement has to be our health services group. Nicole Cooper, our supervisor of health services, our school nurses, just working around the clock, implementing our protocols and mitigating COVID-19 as best we can in our schools. And I just commend them. They do it so gracefully and do it all for the benefit of school safety and health. And I just appreciate their work tremendously. So if you get an opportunity again to reach out to your school nurse or Nicole Cooper and team, I would appreciate a note of gratitude going their way as well. And overall, I appreciate that. Secondly, in the chat, I posted a link for everyone to review. There's a link on our website that we call the Washington Township Points of Pride that we released out not too long ago here, where during COVID-19, there's been a lot of complexities to work through and overcome, and continue to be the case, but there have been some points of sunshine that we are celebrating and lifting up out to our community and community at large that are pretty spectacular in our eyes. And so some things for you to review there speak to our graduation rate being the highest it's been since 2008. They speak to having the most national merit finalists at North Central and compared to all of Marion County. You can see attendance and grades have improved significantly, and you can see some other assessment results that speak to some of the great work as a result of the teamwork of our staff, of our students and families. And so if you get a chance, share it widely. If you're engaging in conversations with colleagues or community members, neighbors whatsoever about the the state of the district, this is a great resource to arm you with some of those talking points. Just again, some things that we're celebrating and thankful for, and have been those little pieces of sunshine that we wanted to make sure we captured for our community. And then finally, thank you to those who participated in our survey regarding school hours and school calendar. Those are two critical areas of operation that could have some potential modifications to next school year and the years after. And so if you've not been staying tuned to board meetings, I encourage you to do so, as I will continue to update the board. Next week, I'll be updating the board on the results of that survey feedback, doing some analytics for both the calendar and the survey in relation to what staff have shared, as well as what families and students have shared in relation to those two critical areas of operation. And so that will be ongoing throughout most of third quarter. And so if we do bring anything forth regarding modifications, that will likely be under board review and potentially approved prior to spring break. So for appropriate planning, family planning going into that final quarter in preparation for the next school year. So again, thank you for your engagement. We've received a strong participation rate, and that is all for my update at this point in time.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Does anyone have any specific questions? This is your chance to kind of have the floor if you have any questions for the administration. And so I have a question, actually, unless someone else wants to jump on. But did you say? I think you said in the board meeting that your responses are always kind of half and half to the school hours issue, which we know, historically we've always, it's just it's a beast that is always kind of the same result over and over again in terms of what people want. And so I don't know if you saw any differences or any new trends there.
So I really haven't seen any new trends. I think what we anticipated being the results have been the results. It's around 50-50. With a little bit heavier support at the secondary, but you also have to factor in how many people make up elementary versus secondary. So again, anticipated that being the case. So nothing new there.
Okay. Do any other parents or caregivers have any questions specific for Dr. Taylor?
I'm just wondering if you can speak to just how staffing levels are and all that kind of stuff right now. I mean, I know we're all hearing anecdotally that things are hard, but anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I would certainly say of all the challenges we are facing, staffing across the board, it continues to be the case. And so, our principals and building leaders are doing a phenomenal job of making do with staff, and staff are being great, being extremely flexible, and covering when they can, and so that continues to be, whether it's child nutrition, school bus drivers, instructional assistants, those continue to be areas of concern with regard to shortages. And then on top of that, you have a very low substitute fill rate. And so that's where that staff flexibility and additional coverage is coming in. That continues to be a challenge right now for sure, because we do have staff who are out with, childcare due to some COVID implications, or they themselves are dealing with illness at home, whether it's COVID or other related illnesses. And so that remains a complex situation for us at this time.
Well, and I know that we have had several of our parent council members have subbed, and they said it wasn't as scary maybe as they originally thought it would be. So I don't know if that's helpful. If someone has has questions about what it might be like to sub, we can connect you with someone who has, so you could have conversations, or maybe just put some feelers out that way, so we can maybe continue to try to support that effort. Avinash, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have to thank Township. My son is in 7th grade, Harvansh Pal Singh, The township, Middle Eastwood Township, provides clothes and shoes to them. No? I'm very much thankful to all that Washington Township. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks a lot. I had no words to define you. The teachers are excellent. He's recently coming from India. They need help to in education, in clothes, food, but determine it. I say that it's a very good. They effort a lot. They are the second mother of my child.
Oh, that's
Township is the second mother of my child. I'm so thank you. I'm glad I'm here.
I'm so
Being a
glad you're
member
here
of the
too.
township.
yes.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for that. Thank you for
They
Thank
that
you.
provide
feedback. And
they
also,
provide many things to my child. They provide many things, clothes, shoes, everything.
that's great. That's great. I'll also say
Thank
too,
you.
Shelley, that reminded me to plug too. Not only do we need substitute teachers, so certainly reach out and we can help connect you. But we also, if you know of nurses, we could absolutely use substitute support with nursing as well. So if you know of anyone
I'm
or
thanking.
want to direct
I'm
anyone
thanks a
my way,
lot.
please do
I'm
so.
thanking so much. We are the members of township, Washington Township. I'm so glad. I'm no words to defines you. Even the counselor of my child also. She's very ground to earth and she helps my child a lot. He helped me locker. He helps him to study. Everything is new for him, no? Everything. He's get a second life. India and the USA has a two faces. They help me in teaching English. I know my English is too bad. No one can understand it, no? But
Doing
I need
fine.
it.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimonial. I think it's important for us to all hear, and it's so nice to meet you, and we're so glad that you came tonight. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank
And
you.
so thanks for helping us now. Thank you. We need your help.
We can.
Thank you. That's great. I appreciate you, Avinash. Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions this evening? If not, I will,
Question in the chat
oh, sorry.
asking about a link.
Oh, there.
Yeah.
Okay, it looks like Dr. Taylor got
Thanks,
that.
Dr. Taylor. Thank
Great.
you.
Well, so I will pass it to Mrs. Deirdre George Davis, who is our school board liaison, so that she can provide us with a school board update and let us know what our school board is up to.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I had to pull up my notes. For those who don't know, I'm an epidemiologist. So when you have, 400,000 COVID cases in a month, work gets very interesting. So I have notes all over the house for everything that I'm involved in. First, thank you as always for inviting me to the meeting and having me in attendance. I'm glad I'm in one place where I can actually be on camera and interact and engage for probably the first time since the school year has started. Just really quickly, the things that I have on my list regarding the board. Obviously, we're monitoring COVID really closely in terms of protocol and safety for teachers, staff, students, basically anyone who enters one of our buildings, making sure everyone stays safe. We're also kind of keeping up with what's happening. I was about to say on the Hill, but with but well, oddly, I'm keeping up with that because of work, but keeping up with what's going on downtown at the State House in terms of the bills that are trying to slide through, both with regards to school board members picking a political party, as well as the things that are centering around equity and SEL and DEI. So we're watching those things, and of course doing what we can to make sure that we're advocating for our teachers and our schools. Also, in case you missed the school board meeting, the board voted unanimously to push forward with our safety audit. So the the district will be conducting an audit, basically about the safety of our schools, just making sure that we're keeping everybody safe, just in light of recent events, whatever that takes. I don't have any specifics to that because it's an audit. So they're actually just going to come in and tell us what they see. So, I can't tell you that, oh, we're putting in metal detectors or, oh, we're going to do this. None of that is anywhere close to being decided. This is just it just started and it's an audit. And then the other thing, sorry, I believe Dr. Taylor mentioned it that I had on my list as well, is the school hours, just kind of following along with the administration as they tackle the surveys and getting the feedback and trying to decide what's going to happen with school hours. And other than that, the board is just trying to really support what the administration is doing to make sure that our teachers aren't more overwhelmed than they already are. I kind of wish some days that I had listened to my husband and gotten a teaching certificate so that I could help. But we're just making sure. So, those that have children in the district, I know that some of the teachers, I've done it myself for the teachers that my son has, as well as other teachers that I know. Just drop them a line, tell them that you appreciate them, let them know that you're thinking about them and hoping that they and their families are okay. You'd be shocked what just a couple of sentences would do for their day.
That is so true. Thank you. Thank you, Deirdre. We appreciate that update. Yeah, I think, just anything we can do to support our teachers and our staff, and we know our administrators are working hard too. I mean, everyone is just really overextended, and so we appreciate everything everyone is doing to keep us going. We know it's hard. All right, so Joel, looks like Joel has joined us.
I'm here.
He just finished testifying and really had a marathon day down at the State House today. So we want to let him give us maybe his perspective on what's happening at the State House, tell us kind of what bills he's following, and maybe answer a few questions, and then we will not keep him forever probably tonight. It's been a long day. So Joel is the general counsel and lobbyist for the Indiana Coalition for Public Education, and he is a grassroots voice, or a presence at the State House, and represents parents, teachers, community members, retired administrators, current administrators, former legislators and elected officials, businesses, really just a real variety of people who care about public education in Indiana. And I will say also that Indiana Coalition for Public Education is a truly bipartisan organization. So without further ado, I will let Joel maybe have the floor, and we'll go from there. Oh, and I would just like to say too that we also have with us a special guest, Kathy Fuentes Rohr, who is the president of Indiana Coalition for Public Education, and she's also a school board member down in Monroe County in Bloomington, and she is charged with kind of leading the ICPE efforts at the state level. And she's actually been a guest speaker in the past for parent council meetings as well. So welcome, Kathy, too. But let's go ahead and let Joel take it away.
Thank you, Shelley. So first, I want to show you where I am. Just some of you don't maybe believe that I just finished testifying, but I'm actually here, and I'm going to do the rest of the presentation from inside this phone booth on the 3rd floor. And as you can see behind me, there's the rest of the State House. So, yep, I'm really here. And it has been a very long day. I got here this morning at a few minutes after 9 o'clock, and here we are at almost 7:30. I'm still here. So it has been indeed a long day. So let's talk about legislation. So far, it has been just an avalanche of bad bills coming forward, being presented by the General Assembly, and that's no surprise. It seems like every year the bills get worse and worse and worse, and this year is no exception. In the 2022 session, we have had bills that will politicize public school boards. We have a bill that will return, well, it won't return Gary Community Schools to the community of Gary, but will return it to more of a true state takeover. We have bills that will arguably limit or perhaps prohibit schools from engaging in CRT instruction or social emotional learning instruction. We have bills that will expand the education savings account program, which is what I just testified on, and truly a whole host of other bills. Let's talk first about some of the things that have been in the news and highly controversial, I think on a pretty broad level, and then I'll open it up for questions. If people have questions about specific bills, then I can then refer to those. The first couple of bills I'm going to talk about are House Bill 1134 and Senate Bill 167. These are the quote unquote anti-CRT SEL bills. Both of these bills have been heard in committee. You probably know, if you've been paying attention to the news, that Senate Bill 167 has been declared dead for the session. Now, both of these bills, when they started, were virtually identical. There were a few words of difference between the Senate version and the House version, but they were very, very similar. And they limit what teachers can teach in the classroom to a large degree and make them subject to parental oversight. So one of the provisions of each bill is that teachers would have to make all of their curricular materials, including lesson plans, available in advance for review by parents on a website or some other electronic means. They would have to make all of their school materials and other curriculum, so not just lesson plans, but any books, worksheets, handouts of any type, outside reading material that they were going to utilize, maps, photographs, videos, audio recordings. If it's a music class, the music that you're going to be teaching your students, all of that would have to be available in advance for parents to be able to review. And then parents would have the option to opt in or opt out of each individualized lesson or piece of curricular material. This presents a myriad of just administrative problems for teachers, for school administrators, in setting up the opportunities for these for parents to review these materials. And then if there is an objection to a particular material, to opt out under each version of the bill, the teacher would have to provide an alternative to that instruction that was then also either opted into or out of by the parent. And one of the things that I testified about on these bills was the fear that there would be a never-ending series of opt-outs. A teacher would prepare their syllabus at the beginning of the class, they would prepare their curriculum, and it's going to cover topics A through Z, and maybe a parent comes in and says, nope, I don't like this portion that you're going to teach on September 30th of this year that deals with whatever. So then the teacher has to write up a whole new lesson plan to address that concern. They then have to present that to the parent, again, in advance. And if the parent objects to that and opts out, then the teacher has to go back and start over and create a whole other lesson plan. So just a whole lot of concerns there about what can be taught. Another portion of these bills that I, as a former junior high, high school, and college speech and debate guy, really found objectionable was that it prohibited a teacher from assigning a student from taking a particular point of view on any issue, that you couldn't force any student to take one view or the other. And I can tell you, and I testified to this in committee, that as someone who took a lot of speech and debate classes in high school and certainly in college, I found that highly offensive. And it's not just in those types of classes either. History classes, government class, science classes, literature classes. Many times as a student, you're asked to look at something from a particular character's point of view or from a particular person's point of view and take that position and argue it, and then look at it from somebody else's point of view and argue it. either in writing or verbally in the classroom. And this bill would have prohibited teachers from doing that. So there are a lot of concerns there. So as I said, Senate Bill 167 has been declared dead for the session. However, House Bill 1134 is still alive. It passed out of committee by a vote of 8-5, meaning that there was one Republican on the committee who voted against it, and all 4 of the Democrats on the committee voted against it. It is eligible to be heard as early as tomorrow again in the House on the full floor. However, the House bill's author, Representative Tony Cook, his father passed away this week, and he has not been at the House for any of the sessions so far this week. So it's not clear whether that House Bill 1134 will come up tomorrow or if it'll have to wait until Monday for that to come up for a vote in the House. Regardless, there's still a lot of controversy around that bill. And my estimation is there's still a very good chance it will pass out of the House. But then we'll have to see what happens to it when it gets to the Senate. Okay, so that's 1134 and 167. And then when I get to the end of my list, if you have questions, I'll be happy to go back to these bills if you do have questions about them. So the next one I'll talk about are school board elections. You just heard from I couldn't tell if it was a school board member or school board liaison to your parent council talking about things there of concern to the school board. If this bill passes, it would require candidates for school board races to declare whether they are a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. And if a school board candidate wanted to declare that they were a Republican or a Democrat, they would have to prove that by either having voted in that primary for the last 2 consecutive primaries, or get a signature on a document from the county party chairman of the county in which they would be running. So the Indiana Coalition for Public Education also opposed that bill. School board elections, as far as I can tell under Indiana law, are the last nonpartisan elections that we have in Indiana. I think everything else that is publicly elected has a partisan designation to it. Indiana, however, is not alone in having partisan school board elections. The vast majority of states around the country still have nonpartisan school boards. And so we would join one of just a small handful of states having partisan school board elections if this bill were to pass. So that bill is currently still sitting in the House Elections Committee. I will tell you, of the dozen or so people who testified on the bill, everyone who testified was opposed to it. There was not a single person who testified in support of that bill. So I'm really curious to see whether they really intend to move that bill out of committee or not. They're kind of running out of time to move the bill. If it is going to go forward, it would have to pass out of committee next week. Next week is the deadline for bills to pass out of committee in both House and Senate. Let's see here. The bill I just testified on, the expansion of the education savings account program. I'm pleased to, if you were paying attention last year to when Indiana created education savings accounts, for those of you who maybe are not familiar with what these are, they're kind of like a private school voucher on steroids. Instead of you getting an amount from the state that would have otherwise gone to your public school, being sent to then the private school of your choice through a voucher, with an education savings account, instead of that ADM money or the state tuition support that would go for your child to the traditional public school, instead of that going to the public school, they send that money instead to you as a parent in this form of an ESA. And then you as a parent can spend that ESA on basically anything you want to educate your child. There's a small list of things from which you only are required to choose one to use that money for. And that includes things like grammar, reading, mathematics, science, social studies, or fulfillment of an IEP 504 or other services plan. Right now, under Indiana law, this is limited only to special education students, as we've seen with many other pieces of legislation in the past. And we've been arguing that this is likely just the camel's nose under the tent, and that the program will likely expand tremendously in future years to include non-special education students. But this totally changes the way that we would look at education in Indiana, from sending your child off to school and having that school be a centralized place within the community, and having children learn kind of standardized curriculum so that everyone gets that same opportunity, to completely decentralizing it and allowing parents to pick and choose as a kind of a cafeteria menu as to what they want their children to learn. As I argued to some legislators earlier today, if a parent had an ESA and they wanted to teach their child Nazism or communism, they could use the ESA to do that. It would fall within the categories, and there would be nothing to prevent that from happening. There are very few controls or safeguards on what parents can choose to have taught to their children through use of the ESA. ESA does not have to be used for school tuition for a private school. It can be used for private tutors. It can be used for the parent to essentially homeschool the child, him or herself, provide for educational materials, which can include things like computers or electronic notebooks, pieces of paper, anything that would have an educational value could be considered what's called a qualified expense. This program is currently run through the Treasurer's Office of the state, and the bill that we just heard, Senate Bill 331, would increase the allocation that the Treasurer's Office gets to oversee the program. Under current law, they would only get 3% of that those funds that come into the program. With the bill that just passed out of committee, that increases that administrative fee for the Treasurer's Office from 3% to 10%. So in a program that already is costing the state $10 million to administer or to run, that's how much is the allocation for it. That's $1 million that goes to the Treasurer's Office to oversee and administer this program. So that's certainly a fairly big concern there. Let's see, going down my list here. We had another bill heard earlier today in the Senate, Senate Bill 17, on material harmful to minors. This bill would, in current law, there is an exemption for school employees and public library employees, preventing them from being prosecuted for dissemination of material harmful to minors as is defined under criminal law. I wasn't here when that law was first passed. That was before my time, but I think the theory is that in libraries, you may find things that could be considered objectionable to someone that could qualify as this material harmful to minors. And it's the library's responsibility then to make sure that, when that's handed out to whoever may check it out, they have, some oversight of that, I suppose. But this law would do away with the exemption for those public school librarians, public school teachers, and public librarians from being exempt from prosecution. Those who testified in support of this bill brought in a packet of materials that they shared with legislators, claiming to have been brought from public school libraries or from materials that were specifically handed out to students by public school teachers that they claimed to be outright pornographic. They did not share these materials with anyone in the audience. They only shared them with the legislators, and the legislative services staff attorneys told us that they were not allowed to share that information with anyone in the public who asked for it, because again, it would be disseminating what they determined to be pornographic material. There was a lot of testimony on this bill. There was a lot of testimony on it previously as well, because there are provisions of Senate Bill 17 that were already included in House Bill 1134 and Senate Bill 167 that dealt with the CRT SEL issues. So they got a second bite of the apple when this bill was given a separate hearing today, and it's being held over for amendments and voting out of committee next week. There was a bill debated this morning in House Education that would also provide an education savings account for remediation purposes. Under this bill, a student who was deemed to be in need of remediation, rather than in the old days, we used to say that students that needed remediation would be able to be eligible for summer school provided by the public school. And with this bill, rather than the public school providing that summer school service or other remediation services, the parent would be given this same education savings account money. And the parent could then choose how to spend that money, whether that was on a private tutor, whether they wanted to hire a teacher to work after hours with their child, or if they wanted to spend it, on getting a new computer or some additional resource materials, they could do that as well. There, in this education savings account for remediation bill, there are virtually no guardrails for how those funds can be spent or any oversight of it. But again, it's just more about driving these choices and decisions for education of the child and right down to the individual lessons to the parent rather than for the teacher him or herself. We have a bill that has not been heard yet, and at this point, I'm somewhat hopeful that maybe it won't be heard on school corporation disannexation. This is a bill that comes kind of out of the South Bend area where there's a particular township within a school district that would like to essentially secede from that school district and join another one. This bill did get a hearing last year, and it did not pass the legislature, and it's been offered again this year. We kept hearing it was going to get a hearing, and so far it has not. And that makes me believe it probably won't get a hearing this year.
Joel,
One more, business personal property taxes. This is another big project we've been working on a lot, really since I would guess early December. There are several bills that are moving through the General Assembly that would eliminate business personal property taxes. So right now, in addition to the other mechanisms that fund your local public schools, a part of what funds local public schools, as well as funds local government of all stripes, public libraries, police, fire departments, townships, cities, counties, towns, et cetera, are funds that were revenue that comes to the state through the application of a business personal property tax. Right now, the state of Indiana has one of the lowest business personal property tax rates in the country. And under the bill that's moving through the House, it would eliminate business personal property tax altogether, which could cost state and local governmental entities, schools, and libraries certainly in the millions and millions of dollars of revenue in the course of a year. So there are a coalition of different groups that have banded together to try to fight back against this and argue to the legislators that if you're going to eliminate this revenue stream for local entities, then you need to replace it with some other potential revenue stream. The bill that's moving through the Senate is a lot more positive than the bill that looks destined to pass in the House. And then when we get to the end of the session and both of those bills have been through the meat grinder, so to speak, we'll see what type of sausage it produces at the end. Somebody had a question they were trying to raise, so I'll go ahead and address that.
it was just me, and I was back to that disannexation bill. The context there, it was specific to a certain area, but was there not also some sort of lawsuit surrounding that? Was that the federal department, a federal lawsuit or something, discrimination, or I can't remember what there was something where they were trying to carve out essentially a community that they didn't want in their school district.
So the bill would allow the citizens of a particular township to essentially secede from the public school corporation that they're in and join an adjoining school corporation, public school corporation. So it's not so much that the current school corporation didn't want that township, as much as it is that the people in that township were trying to secede themselves from that particular school corporation.
And weren't they under a deseg order?
They are under a federal desegregation order. This is a part of St. Joseph County, which is South Bend area. And they, like many other large urban metropolitan areas, are under federal desegregation orders. So there, from a legal perspective, there is an argument that this bill could violate federal desegregation laws. But right now, this bill does not appear to be moving this session. And like I said, it has not passed yet in any previous session either.
And this was a majority white school district that would have that would take a section of mostly white rural people into their school district, and without the permission of the South Bend School District to lose all that funding and those students. It would
Correct. So
the school board of the one that's saying, come over here to us, would be able to make that decision. At least that's how it used to be, right? In the old bill.
So in the current bill, the citizens of the township that want to leave the South Bend schools that are, I haven't looked at the numbers, but I would argue probably are majority of minorities, if you follow what I'm saying there, of students within that school district. This particular township, which is a pretty rural, much more affluent and very predominantly Caucasian population, is seeking to leave that more urban district or more diverse district and join with an adjoining school corporation that is overwhelmingly Caucasian population. I don't get the sense that this legislation or that the efforts are really being driven by either school district. I have always had the sense that this really was being driven by parents in that particular township that just don't want their white kids going to school with a lot of non-white students, is my interpretation of it.
Did you mention, is it 1252?
It's been a long day, so I don't know if I did.
Sharing referenda.
Oh, no, I didn't, and that was on my list to talk about. So yes, I apologize. House Bill 1252 will mandate, if it passes, will mandate that any public school that wins a referendum for any reason will have to share a portion of those funds with charter schools. And in the version of the bill that is proposed this year, it would be for the diversion of funds from the traditional public school that got the referendum. They would lose a prorated portion for every student within their attendance area that, instead of attending that public school, attended a charter school. There have been other versions of this bill in the past and even this session that were different than that, but this particular bill would be one that the money is going to go with wherever the child is. That same sort of dollars following the child philosophy. The problem with that is that the public school still has to bear 100% of the cost of the referendum. And there's nothing in the bill that would require the receiving charter school to spend the funds on the intended purpose from the referendum. So for example, if it was a construction only referendum, there's nothing that would require that charter school to spend that money on construction projects. Or if it was a general fund referendum, there's nothing that would prohibit the charter school from spending it on a capital project. And then the third type of referendum could be for a school safety referendum. And again, if a public school did a school safety referendum and portion of that money had to go to a charter school, there's nothing that would require the charter school to spend that portion on school safety. So there are a lot of problems with that bill as well. That is House Bill 1252, and that is moving as well, and will again come up for the House Ways and Means Committee tomorrow. It's already passed out of the House Education Committee.
Joel, we have a question in the chat. You were talking.
I'm joining you by my phone.
Yeah.
Our reception here in the State House is terrible, so I can't see anything in the chat.
I'm gonna read it for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The ESA bills that you were chatting about earlier and sharing what was going on with those, do they say anything at all about the state treasurer who administers the program performing audits of the expenditure?
There was actually testimony about that today, and part of the treasurer's office's justification for asking for the increase from 3% to 10% of the funds out of the program is because they have to pay for an annual audit of the program to the tune of, I think they said $15,000.
But we know that ESAs are, they've been a problem in Arizona, the education savings accounts that nobody was watching that, and parents were using it for all kinds of things like horseback riding lessons and a trip to Disney World and makeup and all kinds of stuff that was educational purposes for the money.
Yeah, Kathy's absolutely right when she says that every state that already has an ESA program, an education savings account program, has story upon story of examples of fraud that have been perpetrated by the parents, largely due to a lack of oversight, but also due to a lack of specificity in the law. And as I said earlier, under Indiana's law, a parent can say that they have fulfilled their requirements by spending, and again, the law only requires them to spend a portion of the ESA on any one of the following things from that list. And that was the reading, the grammar, the social studies, the science, the mathematics, etc. So if a parent decides when they have an ESA here in Indiana under the current law, if they decide, yeah, I want to go pay for my child to have horseback riding lessons, well, I mean, that might be considered physical education, I suppose. So that might end up being considered a qualified expense, and it's up to the treasurer's office for the state of Indiana to determine what is considered a qualifying expense. So in the way the program works, the parent goes and spends the money, then they turn in the receipt to the treasurer's office, and then after the fact, the treasurer's office gets to approve or deny the expenditure. And if the treasurer's office denies it, then the parent is supposed to pay back that amount, and they can have their ESA revoked for the next year. And so not really a very strict or tough restriction on parents, allowing them to go and do the expenditures first, and then maybe they'll be held accountable for it later.
Well, and I think we need to contextualize this, because a debit card for my kid to do this, it sounds amazing, but what we're talking about is a limited pool of money that the state is obligated to fund, but yet all of these, for lack of a better word, experiments or pet projects drain money from our public schools that rely on that funding to operate for our kids. So some of these things, it sounds great, but really what it's doing is taking money out of the pot that is collectively educating 90% of the kids in Indiana.
Yeah, Shelley actually helped create a really cool graphic during last year's legislative session that showed we have this pipeline of money coming from the General Assembly that's supposed to fund K through 12 education. And it goes into this bucket, and that bucket represents public education, but then there are all these holes being drilled in it. You've got a hole that drains money out for private school vouchers. You've got a hole that drains money out for charter schools. You've got a hole that drains money out for education savings accounts. You've got a hole that drains money out for innovation network schools, and all of these other like Shelley called them, pet projects that some of these legislators seem to have, that all of which take away from the funds that would normally go to the traditional public school. And the other thing that I think is really important about this, and that gets glossed over quite a bit, under the system that we have set up over the course of the last 10 or 11 years, we as taxpayers are now paying for a lot more students than what we used to, not just because our population is increasing, but because with the voucher program and with ESAs, students who were never before a part of the calculation of funding for K through 12 schools are now a part of it, because you don't have to have ever attended a public school in order to get a voucher to attend a private school. So someone who's always educated their kids in private schools and has been able to afford it on their own, now they can get the state to pay for all of it or a part of it. With education savings accounts, parents that have always homeschooled their children now can get money from the state to homeschool their children. Those that have always done that, either send their kids to private schools or continue to homeschool their kids, they've never been included within that count of students to determine how much money we as a state are going to spend on K through 12 education. And we're still not really capturing those numbers when determining what our state K through 12 education budget will be as a whole.
I see someone named iPhone has their hand raised.
Yeah. Hi, sorry. Oh, sorry. That's me, Laura Colbus.
It's okay.
I can't get my video to come
No
on.
worries. That's okay.
Anyway, yeah, so I work for IPS. I'm a social worker, and I just, why did we start giving ESAs and private school vouchers out? I never really understood that. It really hindered, is it for the rich white people? Because, IPS, we serve all the minority children that are getting less and less and less. So what is the reason for that?
So I will tell you the reasons that they claimed at the beginning, and then I'll kind of go through the genesis of what the arguments have evolved into. When the voucher bill was first passed in 2011, so now here we are 11 years later, legislators who supported that bill and authored the bill told us, meaning the general public, that it was to help get poor kids out of failing schools and give them the opportunity for a quality education in a private school. That was the stated goal. And it was repeated again and again and again. Of course, there was nothing in the bill that said that. It didn't limit it only to quote unquote failing school districts. It didn't really limit it only to those who were impoverished. The initial income restrictions were substantially lower than what they are now, to be fair, but they were not people who were just purely living in poverty. It did include portions of the middle class. Over the last 11 years, the voucher program has expanded to the point where now a family of four making, I think the number is now close to $160,000 a year, can qualify for a voucher on an income basis. That kind of blows my mind, really, because that means that my family would qualify for a voucher for our daughter. And I'm a lawyer, and my wife has a master's degree as a school counselor, and here we could qualify for this basically a government handout program is what we're talking about, social welfare, for us to use tax money to send our kid to a private school. Parents have always had the choice to send their child to a private school for as long as we've had public and private schools in Indiana. It was just that it was their responsibility to pay for it. But now with the voucher program, we can require all these other taxpayers to pay all of or part of your tuition. Well, over time, the philosophy or the argument that we were only doing this, we as a state, were only doing this to help poor kids get out of failing schools didn't really hold water. And the reason why I say that is because the original bill didn't require it to be limited just to these quote unquote failing schools. It could be a student leaving any school district to go to a private school. And we saw that the vast majority of students who were utilizing these vouchers after the first few years were predominantly coming from schools that were doing well. Certainly, we did have students who were leaving IPS, were leaving some school districts that were not performing as well on state standardized tests. But we were also seeing a lot of kids leaving places like Carmel and Noblesville and Brownsburg and Zionsville to use vouchers to go to private schools. And the real reason surveys found the parents were choosing to use a voucher to educate their kid had nothing to do with the quality of the education or the quality of the school, but because they wanted to give their child a religious education. And supporters of the bill have kind of now, I think, very begrudgingly admitted that giving parents the option of allowing their kids to have a religious education really was a part of their motivation all along. Now, with creation of education savings accounts, as I said, the current law limits it only to special education parents. And the justification that was made last year when this bill passed was that there are some special education parents who do not feel like the public school, which is obligated under both state and federal law to provide special education services to the child, they didn't feel like the public school was providing the services that they wanted or adequately providing services that the parents wanted. And they felt like they should be entitled to use those funds as they saw fit. And so under the ESA program, the parents can use those funds to take their child out of the public school and put them in a private school, or as I said, they can use independent tutoring. They could, I suppose, use those funds to help supplement putting your child in a full-time residential facility, but it wouldn't come anywhere near close to the cost of covering that, or any other whole host of programs that the parents could choose. And so really, to get back down to it, the whole philosophy behind the school choice model is that parents know better about educating their kids, and that parents should be given the choices, not we as a society or we as a school or a school board or teachers or school administrators. I think that covers it.
Yeah, and I would like to pile on a little bit before you move on, which is that, there's a couple of things. All of these school choices, to be fair, on the one side, would probably not have been so ripe for the picking if public schools had been able to fulfill the promise for all children. And when we abandoned our cities and defunded the public schools and cities and so forth, there were a lot of kids that were having a huge disparity in their school experiences. And a lot of our kids that were historically marginalized were in that boat. But it was it was definitely, they used that narrative, but it was a failure of being able to give resources and do the things that they're now trying to take away from us to make sure that we close those gaps. And the other thing I want to say about the private school vouchers, it's really important to always remember that those schools that take these public funds, they don't have to take every child. They, especially voucher schools, can openly discriminate against children. In my town down here, there's a school that gets hundreds of thousands of dollars of vouchers, but they can tell a child that we won't take you because you're gay or your family is gay, and that's not God's will. And so you're not allowed to be in this school. And so I think it's really important to recognize that this isn't this, we can't compare apples, and we're comparing something that's totally different when you have public schools whose mission is to serve all children and do it well, and public schools do it well. I think it's pretty important to notice that they're backing off of the accountability that has test scores, because they weren't succeeding as well as the public schools were, even though we don't pick our students. And so suddenly that's not a measurement of success for them as much anymore, which is fine, because test scores are very limited and they track higher with kids. Kids do better whose families are educated and higher income. It tells you more about their family background than it does about how well they do in school. But that ability of us taking all kids, and the private schools and charter schools do have a way of being able to skim some of the kids off the top, and they can limit the numbers that come in. but those schools don't have to follow all the laws that public schools do. So I think it's just important to know that when we're talking about expanding public funds to private hands again through ESAs, we're still in court to get what, $150 million back from the Indiana virtual school charter thing. And there are still charter schools that say, we're going to have this many kids in the fall, get that funding and never give it back when they only have a part of those kids. There's no mechanism in our state. There are no guardrails. So there, sorry.
And there's after count date issues, which we've seen, we know happens, at least in our district, where, you know, after count date, then they're counseled out from wherever they are and they come back to the public school, but the funding is already at the previous school.
Right. Yep.
And just to piggyback on something that Kathy said there too, one of the things that goes along with being a public institution like a traditional public school is you have a tremendous amount of scrutiny over your finances. You have to submit your budget and go through the State Board of Accounts, and it has to be done at a public hearing where the public can have an opportunity to hear what's going on with your budget and have input into it. None of that exists with private schools that accept vouchers. They can spend that money that they receive from a voucher on whatever they want. And there was even a pretty well-known example of a church school in Fort Wayne that used the voucher money, and the priest even bragged about it from the pulpit about the voucher money allowing them to build a new steeple for their church. So there was no accountability for how those funds were spent in the voucher program, nor are they still. And with charter schools, you have a lot of out-of-state operators of those charter schools that are making huge profits off of the money that they receive from the students coming into the charter schools. That doesn't trickle down into teacher salaries, doesn't trickle down into additional programs or services for the kids. They frequently go into the pockets of those profiting off the charter schools, those CEOs and donors, et cetera. So there's some real problems there with a lack of financial transparency and oversight. Not to mention the fact that the private schools that have vouchers or the charter schools typically don't hold public meetings, or at least ones that are easy for the public to attend in the case of charter schools.
So we have a question that came through our chat. It's in regards to House Bill 1134. Does it still have language in it where parents and community members can sue schools? Can an individual actually sue a public school, or is that not possible and they'd have to sue the State Board of Education? How does that work?
For a violation of the failure to provide access to the materials, I assume is where that question is going. And there is a civil cause of action that is still in the bill. It allows the parents to sue the teacher and the school individually. There is a process for the appeals. So if a parent claims that a teacher has failed to provide them in advance some educational material, and they also failed then to provide it within 5 business days after the lesson was taught, or if they provided them something and then used something else, perhaps, there's a process in House Bill 1134 to allow the parent to challenge that to the school, challenge it then to the individual school building, then to the school administration and the school board, then eventually to the state board, and they could then file a civil lawsuit as well. All of that is included within the language in House Bill 1134, I believe, as it still stands now. I don't have that bill up in front of me, and my computer just died, so I can't even look it up to confirm that that's still in the bill, but I believe that that is correct.
There's a comment that came through that I think is definitely worth sharing. It states that ESA is a terrible idea, but at the very least, if a parent doesn't pay back the money, the treasurer should be able to ask that any state tax refund due to the parent be offset by the amount they owe for the ESA monies.
That might be nice, but that's not in the bill, so the treasurer wouldn't be authorized to do that. So
what a great idea. Maybe they should talk to their legislator because.
So, I mean, this could go on, right? For
yeah,
forever.
I'd like to wrap this up here in the next couple of minutes so I can go pick my daughter up from her practice tonight, which ends at 9.
So, so tell us this: if we were to be concerned or enraged or whatever about some of this legislation, what can the regular average parent do?
You can do lots of things. It's a great question, Shelley, and thank you for asking it. I always encourage people who are willing to do it and invest the time and effort to come and testify at a committee hearing when a bill is being considered. Those who have done it, and I know Shelley has done it, I think can tell you that it can be a rewarding experience, perhaps cathartic is the right word at sometimes, to testify. And I think it's extremely educational for citizens and parents to come and see the process for themselves and participate in it. So that's number one. But I also recognize it's really, really hard to do that. We don't get a whole lot of advance notice of what bills are going to be heard on what dates. Sometimes it's as little as 24 hours notice. And as we get later in session, it's less than that because the rules change as we get later in the session. But you can always still call your local legislator. You can email them. You can send them a letter or a postcard. And you can also do those same things with any legislator, perhaps that serves on a committee of a bill that you're interested in. So if it's the House or Senate Education Committee, you can send communications to all of the members of the committee, even if they're not your own individual legislator. For those of you there in Washington Township, you have some wonderful legislators to work with that I work with, I would say almost every day here at the State House, and Carrie Hamilton and Fatty Cadora. And I'm not saying that as a political statement because they're Democrats or Republicans, but just they are very, very easy for me to work with and to talk to, always very accessible and responsive. I can't say the same for all legislators on both sides of the aisle. There are some offenders on both sides, and there are some good legislators who are very responsive on both sides of the aisle. But you have two there in Washington Township that are very responsive to questions and requests and information and communication.
Go ahead, Ken. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, if anybody is nervous about it or they don't think they know what to say, ICPE is more than happy to help you with talking points, and you can join us. And we do calls to action. We can give you talking points and do try to give talking points to the public about what to say also to your legislators, because I think as we recognize there are these purple parents that are being organized, and they're being organized partly out of state, but they are being organized, and there are different organizations that are not pro-public education that do a lot of organizing of parents. And we are a volunteer run group like your own there, and we need parents to join us, and we will help you in talking to your legislators. But if you just talk to these legislators and give them the counterpoint, because I know as a parent of 4 children, I know that my kids are learning amazing things. And they just need to hear the positive, because they're getting all the negative. They're getting conspiracy theories. They are being given their own little tinfoil hats free of charge. But we can hopefully be able to give them the counterpoints to that about what great things are happening for our kids. And they really need to hear it, that we don't want them messing with it. Because really these bills, 1134 and the SB 167, these are basically bills that are beating up on teachers. We have a board member, Tony Lux, who said you could just call that bill the teacher harassment and work overload bill, is basically what it is. And we need our teachers to stay in the field.
And one thing I wanted to say is that I think last year we tried to do, and with Crystal, it was kind of Crystal's idea, along with some other people. We put together a Twitter campaign that was statewide, that I think got attention. It may not have killed a bill or anything, but I think it maybe drove some more conversation on these issues. And so that's something that maybe we could put together as well. And also, if this is the right way to say it, but at your legislator when you're tweeting or when you're doing anything, tag them. And tag the caucus or tag the governor or whoever you want to tag. But I think that gets seen as well.
Yeah, and you can do that. You can tag the House Republicans, you can tag the House Democrats, you can tag Senate Republicans, you can tag Senate Democrats, you can tag Katie Jenner, who is the Secretary of Education. You can tag Governor Holcomb in any of your social media, and I highly recommend that. When I put out a tweet, I will frequently do that for some of the affected parties or individual legislators if I think that it might be helpful or powerful to do so.
And you brought up Dr. Jenner. I did actually, as Parent Council Network, reached out to, because every year we've invited the state superintendent of public instruction to come and discuss kind of the state of education in Indiana and specifically Washington Township. And she wrote back and was not available and not doing speaking engagements, I was told. So FYI.
She also doesn't come and testify in committees, unlike most of her predecessors. So.
And that position is no longer elected. So that's
correct.
An position. Well, so does anyone have any more questions for Joel? We can let him go pick up his daughter and maybe get some food and maybe some sleep today.
I still have to prepare testimony on 3 more bills for tomorrow that I haven't even started on yet. So it's going to be a long night.
Oh, well, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to give us this update. We have recorded it, so we will probably post it for people to see online. I think there's valuable information. And then I think we will also try to write up a summary for people that they can reference when they choose to reach out to legislators and committees and all of that. So thank you, Joel. We appreciate you.
You're all very welcome. I enjoy talking to this group. I'm sorry that we can't do it in person. I look forward to the day when it's safe to do that again. It's harrowing to come into the State House every day and know that a lot of the legislators are not vaccinated. Yeah. None of them wear masks, or hardly any of them wear masks. It's concerning every day, and maybe one day we can get out of this and get back to the point where we can safely meet in person. But thank you for all that you do with the Parent Council Network and for being involved, parents, with your children's education. That is so critically important. And I'll end on this note. If you care about public schools, which I will always contend are truly the bedrock of our democracy, you need to get involved. You need to get involved with your school, and you need to get involved with knowing what's going on with the General Assembly and the legislature, and make your voice heard, because all that these people are hearing right now in this building are about how terrible public schools are and what they need to do to change it and make it more so that the parents can control it. We all know that parents already have the ability to control what goes on in their public schools by electing their school boards, by being involved, and you need to send that message loud and clear to them. But thank you once again for having me. I hope you all have a great evening.
Thank you, Joel. We will, does anybody have any additional thoughts or conversation about what we just heard? Kathy is still here. She might be able to answer a question if anybody has one.
Shelley, I just think it's really important to state what Scott posted in the chat, because so often we sit in these meetings and we hear Joel talk about what's happening at the State House. And a lot of us ask, well, how does that affect me? And how does that affect, my kids, my district? And so this statistic that he posted is just in the 2020-2021 school year. That's a lot of 20s. But just in that one school year alone, vouchers in the amount of $6.7 million were paid just for students living in Washington Township. So I think that hits us, that hits our home. And I think that's a really important number and statistic to share with everyone, because it matters, and that's affecting our kids in our schools.
You're absolutely right. And Kathy and I can tag team this too, but the bucket that we referenced, right? The pot of money that is basically generated to fund education, and the holes in the bucket. And a lot of people think, well, we don't have charter schools, or there's no voucher schools in my district. It doesn't affect me. That is patently false. Because of the way the schools are funded and the way the bucket works. When there's less money in the bucket, that means less money coming to all the schools across the state. And so that's important. And I will go ahead. Kathy, did you want to say
No,
anything more about that?
I posted right above his comment, I posted the blog post where we used the Phil Downs, the former superintendent over by Fort Wayne. I can't remember the district.
Southwest Allen County. Yeah.
Yeah, he had taken all the data, and what it is basically if a student were to, if that money that went to the voucher were to be put back into the big pot that goes to all of us and shot out through our funding formula, that money is what you would otherwise be getting. So that I think is important to know. And we have a blog post there put together there that shows each district, or many of them anyway.
Does anybody have anything else they want to bring up for the legislative portion? I'm going to pass it to Crystal, who she may have, I think she put a link in the chat, but she is our Parent Council Network public policy chairperson. And so her goal is to help us coordinate with each other and collaborate with each other to take action. So if you are so inclined to participate in this committee, which is you maybe just promise that you'll write a postcard, or you're going to promise that you'll call your legislator or email them, or perhaps you are, really interested in learning more about testifying and what that looks like. Parents can also lobby themselves. They can go down and pull a legislator out of session and have a chat. So Crystal is our public policy chair. And so I don't know if you have anything you want to add or say, Crystal.
I feel like I don't need to say much because Joel really did the hard work on this one, but I would just say that if the things that you've heard tonight concern you, if you're seeing these bills play out and saying, what the heck, if you are like me and are just absolutely terrified that we could lose the quality educators that we have because of these overwhelming demands, as Kathy put forward, this is just really already overworked and underpaid teachers if these things were to be enacted. Please fill out our form. You're not signing your life away. You're just saying, I want to be on the contact list. So, and when you're on that list, when we have an action that needs to be taken, we'll be reaching out to you. We'll be sending you an email, and your participation is at your comfort level. So if your comfort level is sending an email, awesome. We'll let you know when you need to send an email to your representatives. If your comfort level is posting about this on your social media accounts and asking your friends to send emails and call their legislators, then awesome, we'll take that. If your comfort level is testifying, amazing, we'll take that. We are really just looking for those parents who want to be plugged in on these issues and want to know when they can take action that will really make a difference. A lot of times when we think about politics, we think about the president, or we think about folks like Todd Young or Mike Braun, and those people at the federal level are important. But when it comes to the matters that affect our daily lives, and in particular our public schools, it is the folks at the state level that make the really important decisions. But that's actually a good thing for us because those folks are super accessible to us. We elected them, our tax dollars pay their salaries, and they are obligated to listen to us and hear our voices. So this is a place where you can really affect change. These are issues where your phone calls and your emails and your postcards and your letters really do make a difference. And there are people in those offices that are tracking the responses that they get. So it can seem like an uphill battle, but state government is really where individual voices can start to make a difference. And I've got a long history of volunteering in various ways and in various issues. And I've learned a lot. And I used to be really intimidated by the state house and the whole process, but it's really just about not being afraid, getting in there, reaching out and making your voice heard in whatever way works for you, whether it's an email or a phone call. So I've dropped the link in the chat a few times. Please feel free to fill it out. Again, you're not signing your life away. It's just being the first to know when we have an action that we need folks to take. So
Thank you.
Anything else to add there, Shelley?
Well, and I would just say I was actually on a call with Carrie Hamilton in another meeting before I came here, and she made a point of saying, even if your legislators are voting, they're going to vote in support of public education. Her point was, don't avoid contacting me for that reason. Please tell your legislator whether you think they're going to vote the right way or the wrong way. They want to be able to say, I've received X number of messages or emails or phone calls in support or against a certain piece of legislation. And they, like you said, they track that. And so even if you're supportive of what they're doing, they need to hear as well. So well, great. Thank you, Crystal. I appreciate it. Let's see, Taryn, do we have any financial update at all? Has anything changed?
Not since I think November. Of course, we were all kind of on holiday. So just real briefly, as Shelley mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we consider all parents and caregivers within Washington Township to be ad hoc members of Parent Council Network, and there are no fees or dues or anything to join that. We exist purely off of donations, and we run a pretty shoestring budget. So for example, for this year, we've budgeted that we hope to raise $900, and that is just to pay our website fees and pay for our Zoom license and help us get materials and things to reach parents at, we were at homecoming, and we will be at the Great North Run. So those sorts of things. And so to date, we've already raised 630, so we're about 70% of the way there. And I know there are definitely people on this call tonight who have donated. So thank you to everyone who has done so. And I'm going to put in the chat the link for anybody else who at this point would like to donate and help us.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then I don't know if Scott, if you want to say a little bit about what we can look forward to, hopefully next meeting next month.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot to do. PCN has we have our hands in a lot of different conversations. There are a lot of conversations happening about education, and we try to make sure that parents have a voice in all those conversations. But the number one thing we try to do every 2 years is make sure parents have a major role in school board races. School board races really are the backbone of what we do. Again, every 2 years when there's an election. So if you are new to this group or relatively new, I'm gonna try to perk your ears here, because every 2 years there's a process where we form a committee that for a couple of months really is the backbone of that effort to facilitate a conversation around the school board race. So there are some school board vacancies or seats that will be up in the fall, and the process essentially it kicks off next month. What we're doing next month is having a panel where some current and former school board members are going to be talking to us about what school board is, School Board 101, because everyone knows that school boards are important, but I think there are a lot of misconceptions about what school boards actually can do, can't do, should not do. And so we're just going to talk a lot about that topic to make sure we're all on the same page. If you are, like I said, if you're new here, this is a great way to get connected and to really make a difference really fast. This is serving on this committee is exactly what I did. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago when I was a young man. And it's just a really great way to get connected and make a big difference. So definitely come back next month for that conversation. and keep your ears peeled for sure, for that opportunity to serve on that committee. So
Great. Thank you, Scott. And next, let's see, what date is that? What day of the week is that? The 25th. Is that that's Tuesday of next week. Washington Township Parent Council Network was invited to participate in the parent caregiver webinar series that the district leadership equity team is putting on, where they're showcasing and kind of introducing everyone to the different possibilities for parent involvement in the district. So we have they'll have representatives from the Advancement Center. They'll have Brian Henry, who is our president, who will be president of Parent Council next year. He's our president-elect this year. He will be serving on the panel to talk with that group next Tuesday. And actually, all parents and caregivers are welcome to attend that, to just learn about all the different ways that parents can be involved in supporting Washington Township schools. So with that, I think we've gone a good hour and a half. So I think we've probably hit the Zoom wall. Is there anything else anyone wants to say, or for the good of the order, anybody have any other comments or thoughts? Well, I thank you all for taking time out of your busy evening. What are you doing on Wednesdays at 7? You're usually busy being a parent. So we thank you for coming, and we'll look forward to seeing you all next month. Thank you. Bye-bye.